A big welcome to all of you. Some of you might have some very large projects on your hands at the moment, or are definitely looking to work on some big projects. Some of you are project managers now, by chance and circumstance. Some of you have trained to become project managers, and some of you want to take an MPM to master project management. So today we're going to look at project management in the 21st century. My name is Joe O'Brien. I'll be your moderator for today. And I'm an MBA student for my sins. I'm in the consultancy end of my student life cycle. I'm looking at consumer behavior in social media. That's going to be my consultation subject. So a bit of project management involved there. So I'm really glad I've got an expert who might be able to help me. Mr. Udi Engelsman is a faculty member, teaches on the campus at University of Liverpool itself. Hello, Udi. Welcome today. Thank you very much for being here. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here.
So, Udi, just to give a bit of a background to our audience today about what they can expect is we asked you and discussed with you project management, general trends and our program and the kind of landscape of project management. We asked you a bunch of kind of probing questions to see what your opinion on the current state of project management, whether that's what you learn on our programs, what it's like to be a project manager now, some of the trends and behavioral attributes, and then you gave us some lovely answers back. And today our webinar is going to concentrate, Udi, if that's okay, on you elaborating a bit upon those answers. Is that all right with you?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So that's also going to have, very important for our audience today, an opportunity for the audience to ask you, Udi, some questions. So please listen up carefully, because you'll get out of this session what you put into it. Whether you're a student at the university or a prospective student looking at our programs, I'm sure you have plenty of questions to ask how you can succeed. So please send those questions through to us, and we'll look to get to them in about the 40-minute mark. And we also have, a lovely video I think is involved in this webinar. Some of you want to know a bit more about the application process to the university, so I've got a couple of minutes video there before the Q&A that we're going to show you as well. And I'll ask Michael, our producer, today to remind me to show that video just in case I forget. So there you go. So let's continue with our presentation for today, and let's look at the first question that we asked Udi. Udi, you're a project manager. It's your life. You teach it. You're actually involved in active projects. What's really your favorite thing or your favorite elements about project management, and why?
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting question, and I think projects are about change, are about complexity, they're about delivering a product with a set defined goal. And what I love about project management is the fact that you have an interface between people and processes. You have a set structure, you have tools and techniques, and you have a framework which you follow, and that's fantastic because it gives the project a structure to go from inception, from planning, even before you start, through to the planning stage, to executing stage, to project closure. And that's a fantastic way to make sure that the project is delivered successfully. But of course, this project structure, this framework doesn't work in a vacuum. It's all about people, and that's something I'll probably come back to a lot today, is the fact that project management is mostly about stakeholder management, about managing people, about managing the interface between your product that you have to deliver and the people involved, both project team members and also other stakeholders who are involved in the project. And I love the combination of the two, using the structure and the framework and the tools in order to deliver a project through the management of people.
Well, I like that. And you say here, even if you have all the best processes, analysis, and software, which I'm sure a lot of people want to get into, the project is still much more likely to fail without the right people management and communication. So I think, is emotional intelligence a key attribute, as well for a project manager then in this circumstance?
Yeah, absolutely. Emotional intelligence is a really, really important thing. I mean, if you're looking to hire your project management, or you're looking to hire people who are going to work on your project, key skills such as emotional intelligence are really vital in order to ensure the success of the project. And yeah, I'd say however many tools and techniques and computer programs or whatever that you have, if you don't have the right people managing your project or working on your project is bound to fail. And that's something I've seen throughout the last couple of years, is that having the right people on the job is probably the most important factor in terms of successful projects. It's such a key thing, and it's actually very tricky, because when you're looking to hire people, it's very hard to tell if they're the right person or not. And you often people learn through their mistakes in terms of having right people on board.
I mean, I think we're all experiential learners, the majority of us, whether we'd like to admit that or not. And I think, I'm sure there are some project managers here who are thinking, gosh, yes, I've had some smooth runnings with stakeholder management, and I've had some less smooth runnings with that. And a lot of projects, I suppose, are about winning over hearts and minds. And so you have to have a kind of data-driven approach, but at the same time, you have to convince people of a change maybe that might be happening with the business or with that project, and that requires softer skills. And you said the third element that you enjoyed about project management was the active teaching of project management. What is it about teaching that you enjoy so much?
So specifically, I guess, I love teaching on the online program at University of Liverpool, just because of coming into contact with project managers and just people who are learning about project management from a bunch of different sectors, many different cultures, different parts of the world. It truly is a global classroom. And I've had contact and interaction with people that I don't think I ever would have had if I hadn't been teaching on this project management degree. I mean, just for example,
Nice.
My background is in, say, urban regeneration, managing regeneration programs. We might discuss it a bit later, but I've been in contact with people managing billion-dollar oil and gas infrastructure projects, or construction projects in Africa, or building roads and tunnels all over the world. And I've learned plenty from my students in the course, and it's really been wonderful seeing people with different experiences, different cultures, and different sectors interact, all to discuss project management critically. And that's actually brought me great joy.
Oh, I love that. And I share that experience from the MBA, Udi. Like, we sit in a class and I have someone who's a marketing director of Taco Bell in Canada, and have someone who's a CEO of 15 radio stations in Asia, and it can sometimes be a bit overwhelming. And our instructor is learning off us as much as we are off them in a way, because they're providing kind of a foundational structure for us to discuss our experience and kind of learn off each other. Does the same happen in the project management classes in terms of the sharing of experiences, etc.?
Oh, it absolutely does. Just because online collaboration is such a key part of the learning experience and of the degree. I actually say it's the main process of knowledge creation in the online classroom is collaboration. And collaboration is an open space for students to discuss their ideas and to link them to the literature and the theory. So every week over the program, students feel free to elaborate on their experiences, on their ideas, and it's a wonderful forum. I've often found myself going back to classes taught year or 2 years back, just because I remember there were interesting case studies, interesting opinions from people with actually more project management experience than I have. So that's been very valuable for me.
Well, maybe we live in interesting times, and indeed we do. For our students, they'll know very well about the collaboration on the program, and for our prospective students, it's certainly something to consider when looking at our degrees. How much interaction are you getting? What are the caliber of the students sitting in those virtual classrooms with you, and what's the caliber of the faculty member? What are the levels of interaction? All things to kind of check off when you're looking at applying. Now, we touched upon this earlier, but in your opinion, what are really the key behavioural attributes that you've seen in effective project managers, and that you'd like to tell your students about?
Right. When discussing the traits or the attributes of a project manager, I wanted to go beyond sort of what it means to be a manager. To be a good manager, you need to have good organizational skills. You need to have good time management. You need to have good attention to detail. But I think in terms of project management, and it goes back to what I said a few minutes ago, the key is to be able to work with people, as well as I mentioned, flexibility and adaptability, I think go together. Because projects these days are so fluid and dynamic, you need someone who can not be set in their ways, to go halfway through a project and say, actually, we need to reevaluate our baselines. We need to change the cost, the schedule. We need to change our whole approach. And that's a trait that's, I think, really important for a successful project manager that goes beyond what it means to just be a good manager. You need strategic thinking, because projects, yes, they're about delivering a good or a product within a set defined period of time, But I think good project managers think beyond the project itself. They think strategically. They think about the organization. They think about the wider long-term impact of the project. And successful project managers have this ability to think strategically. And then finally, I said good people skills, which is really important to get the best out of the people. You have to get buy-in, to have the emotional intelligence, the social intelligence, I think, as well, in order to make a team work together and get good buy-in for project delivery.
Certainly, and there's a lot of stimulation here for students across all courses to kind of think about the differentiation between project managers, and certain situations that you'll be in. Many of us might be managers on the floor and then be project managers as well half the time when we work in working groups and stuff. There might be different hats that we might have to wear depending on that, and different kind of leadership or management styles that are suitable for those two different roles. A lot of people trip up on the difference between flexibility and adaptability. Can you outline what the key difference is, Udi, between flexibility and adaptability?
Oh, it's actually quite a tricky one.
Yeah.
If we think of,
I need to learn as well.
If we think about the concept of flexibility, I guess it's about giving leeway. It's about enabling people to work within certain boundaries. To say we've got to deliver something, but I could be flexible about how you go about delivering it. There are red lines you can't cross, but within the spectrum, there is some flexibility. So I guess you're giving freedom. You're giving for people to take the initiative, to figure things out for themselves, to not micromanage people. I'd say that's in terms of giving flexibility as a project manager to your project team members. And in terms of adaptability, it means, I guess, your willingness to allow change, to admit that you're wrong, to learn from other people, to say maybe our approach is in fact ineffective, and we need to change our way of thinking. And I guess that's a good distinction between the concepts of flexibility and adaptability.
Very nice. What we learn on the MBA a lot of as well in leadership is kind of transformational quality, inspirational quality. Do you find that those kind of skills also translate into project management? That kind of ability to inspire or to have a certain vision about what you're doing. Is leadership important?
I think absolutely the concept's interchangeable between sort of your MBA and project management. Absolutely different types. We discuss in our programs different concepts of leadership, and transformational leadership is always the most important one. And what I have students reporting quite often is that actually in organizations that aren't very mature project management organizations, their leaders are sort of autocratic micromanagers who don't allow any flexibility and are definitely not adaptable. And they report that there's such a difference between the theories that we learn about enabling people to grow, to develop, to come up with their own ideas, is so different from what some people are experiencing on the ground, where they have managers who are so strict about following guidelines and rules and reporting all the time that actually it's tricky to get buy-in, and it's tricky to get motivated workers. So absolutely, we're moving towards a need for transformational leadership, leadership that allows workers and people to be independent to a certain extent.
Nice. So there's a lot of angles, and that's something that's the heart of this webinar today, Udi, is there's a lot of ways to get into project management. There's various methodologies. They take various different lengths of time. Some of them are more suitable for certain industries. In your opinion, is there really a prevailing project management methodology that works across all the cultures, all the sectors? If you learn this one way of being a project manager, then you can go anywhere and put down your suitcase and start managing projects. Is there one kind of method? How would you go about that?
Yeah, I think there are different methodologies, and quite often what you find is people trained in a certain methodology become sort of ambassadors for that methodology and say this is the one way that to run a project. And traditionally, I guess we talk about the PMI, the Project Management Institute, and Prince 2 as traditional project management methodologies, and then we move towards Agile and Scrum, which are sort of newer, more fluid, dynamic ways of working through projects. And I don't think one way is is necessarily better than the other. Both provide the tools, the techniques, the framework, and the structure to manage a project. What I will say, and I think I say at the bottom of the slide, is that some projects are more suited to the more traditional methods, and these are probably related to construction industries where you have a set scope and a deliverable that you know is clear and defined from the beginning. But on the other hand, if you're developing a piece of software, and actually when you actually start, you might say, we actually don't know what the finished product is going to look like, because there are going to be so many iterations and so many changes along the way. Then maybe a methodology such as Agile or Scrum, which allows for more changes, more flexibility in terms of your project scope and definition, might be more suitable to that.
So it's a horses for courses type argument. Depending on what the nature of your business or project is, there's going to be a methodology that's suitable for that.
I think so, and I think it's also hard to generalize. You've got to look at the specific individual project. And I guess we discussed, I brought up the idea of culture as well. That's difficult to define, and we have different types of culture. You have organizational culture, you have national culture, you have, and all these might affect or impact on your choice of methodology.
Of course. And so drilling more into the methodology as we are here, we're discussing our MPM. MPM is once you're a student, everyone refers to the Masters of Project Management as MPM, so it's an acronym that everyone will get used to. So why would someone study for the Master in Project Management as opposed to a certified short course, such as Lean Sigma 6, like you're talking about, or Agile? What is it about the MPM? What's the attractant?
Right, so I'm not going to try and say that I teach on the MPM, so you must have an MPM and it's the best.
Of course not.
The best option. I'll actually start by saying that I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I don't think taking a professional qualification such as Agile or Scrum or Prince 2 is mutually exclusive with the MPM. What I will say is that I think the MPM does something probably quite unique in that it gives you both depth and breadth.
Nice.
The breadth, I'd say, is in terms of broadening your horizons, as we just said, coming into contact with different people, looking at different methodologies, looking at wider issues and just specific project management, learning how to think critically, learning how to write academically, learning how to research. These are all skills that stay with you for life. That's the breadth aspect of the program. And the depth is that actually, yes, you'll spend your year or 2 years going into a lot of detail about project management, and you will come out with very good and detailed knowledge about how to manage a project through the methodologies that we discussed, mainly through the MPM. But that's, I think, something unique about the MPM. It gives you both breadth and depth, and it goes beyond specific project methodology into terms of critical thinking, into learning how to, I guess, become an academic and critical researcher and thinker.
And I think, how important is it on some of these large projects to be research-minded? How much has that helped you, for instance, having that academic background?
So I think the key thing is about thinking critically. Once you pick up a skill in terms of thinking critically, which actually takes time, just the fact to say when you have a problem on a big project, to not rush into any decisions, to take your time, to look at different options, to look at different solutions. Just that process of actually taking a step back and saying, what are the different options? How can I manage this process? That in itself is a skill that you might not develop if you didn't have the academic training. And I think that's very, very important.
As well as the other general kind of add-on benefits, the networking opportunities, obviously, the discipline of time management that you have to put yourself through, which kind of strengthens your ability to perform as a project manager, which is essentially around your ability to manage people and time frames. You're collaborating with people on the degree, you're working to tight time frames all the time, whether you're on a management program, a supply chain program, an MPM program, a public health program. It doesn't matter. We're all doing the same kind of routine assignments and feedback, and those are obligations, and they make us a bit more conscious about our time and how we manage that. I'm
on the other side of it, but I think students have their own WhatsApp groups and they stay in touch and in contact well beyond the end of the program, and they I guess search each other, they ask opinions, they develop lifelong professional relationships.
Yeah. I think that's a big pull why people do, what I call, higher master's degrees at Russell Group or Ivy League institutions is that you do have access to that certain kind of caliber, capacity and experience, and that's a definite reason to be involved in that. So let's look at some of the trends. In your opinion, what are kind of some of the current global trends or happenings that are going on now that you can see in project management?
This is a really big question in terms of look at global trends. What's going on globally?
Tell us everything that's happening. Every single.
I guess my opinions are from sort of my project management experience as well as my interaction with students over the last couple of years. And I'd say project management as a discipline is coming of age. Organizations are valuing the idea of managing a project in a structured manner. And I think this is a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because we see lots of people becoming project managers without any formal training.
Yes.
So you have an organization that said, actually, we want to manage a project, and we value the fact that we need to define this as a project with a beginning and an end, and we need to define the cost and the schedule and the scope of the project. But actually, we'll just designate one of our managers, one of our employees as the project manager.
Yes. Anyone can project manage.
Right. And I say this. I actually argue this in itself is a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because these organizations are seeing the value of designated projects. They're seeing the value of saying, we're going to manage this process from beginning to end as a project with a defined scope. And this is a good thing.
No, I think it's
good. Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic thing. You talk about better focus on defining project scope. I mean, I'm a student at the university, and about a couple of years back, I was asked to be involved in looking at developing content for onboarding our new students. And I've had some experience of project management before, so I took a project management hat on, and I started looking at ways we could ensure that students were supported as they join the university, and big scary new proposition to study online, and how could they be better prepared. And I did that for about a month and a half as an ad hoc project manager until I moved into their next position. And then they hired an actual project manager to do that role. And the difference, I have no problem saying the difference between what I could see in the project and deliver and the difference between hers is absolute leaps and bounds, because I didn't have any of the theoretical framework that helped me understand solutions when I faced resistance or issues. But she did, because she'd gone and studied that. So there's a real thing to say to go and formally study something to be able to deal with some of those issues that come up, which leads to our next question then. How does a project manager, in your experience, handle some of this resistance to the project, especially if they might not be as experienced as yourself?
Yeah, I think resistance is going to occur at every project. And linking back to what we were just discussing, many organizations will say, we have a project, time is money, just get on with it. That's an internal form of resistance. You don't spend time planning, just begin your project and see what happens. That's a form of resistance that happens in many organizations right at the start of the project. We don't want to spend the time and the money on planning properly. And I think at the start of every project manager has to take the time to think about where resistance is going to come from. Is it going to come from somewhere internal? Is it going to come from somewhere external? Is it going to be senior management that's going to be against the project, not going to provide me with my resources? Is it going to be some sort of green environmental group who are against what's going on? Depending on the project, there's going to be internal and external resistors. And the key is to identify them early and work with them proactively in order to minimize the potential damage to the project.
There you have it. It's a proactive stakeholder management. So really, as we were discussing before, your ability to handle individuals lies at the heart of the role. That's a very human thing. So the current trend nowadays is computers are taking our jobs. We were discussing before, Rudy. Every webinar I do, there's a question, whether it's project management, business, leadership, public health, is what role will artificial intelligence play in the future of ... And today we asked that question for project management for you then. With all the stakeholder control and everything, what role does artificial intelligence play for you in project management?
Yeah, it seems to be the hot and sexy topic at the moment.
Yes, it is.
When a robot's gonna take over, and
that's why everyone's in the webinar, Rudy. They want to know whether the robots are going to take their jobs.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. I'd say so. We value the importance of experience in sort of product management.
Mm.
Um, and I guess what we're seeing is slowly we're getting artificial experience. We're getting software, we're getting algorithms that are able to gather a huge amount of experience and, in theory, to lead and help product managers in terms of managing their project. I personally think we're actually far away from robots taking over project management, because I'm a big proponent of soft skills and people management, and the need to work closely and empower people. And I just don't think robots and software is there yet. I do think that software and artificial intelligence might help us to work alongside people or with people, but we're far away from talking about artificial intelligence taking over project management completely. Although it's worth mentioning, if anyone wants to look at this, sort of Microsoft's CEO talked about Microsoft's product management artificial intelligence program. I think his name's Nadella, if anyone wants to check up. He spoke. He gave a presentation just a few months ago about how Microsoft is developing artificial intelligence project management, and it's something they've got in the works. And everyone's talking about it, but I think we're far away from sort of robots becoming project managers. But it's not long before you'll see sort of a construction manager or a foreman on the ground with an iPad rather than with pen and paper, using certain software to help manage a big project.
No, we had a webinar a couple of months ago called Data-Driven Decision Making. Guys, check it out on our YouTube page for the University of Liverpool Online. And this is the exact kind of issues that we're talking about, that now with all the streams of data, we're running them through packages to kind of look at how best to reach our business outcomes. And people don't realize that's artificial intelligence and machine learning too. It's not just all robots that can do stuff for you. It's also spreadsheets and things that kind of suggest to you what direction you should be heading in. And certainly there's a lot of scope for that currently in project management, but still, as you say, it's the experience of the person in front of you and how they interpret that data that still is the key skill in terms of the project manager. So let's have a look at what tools the project manager can use to appraise risk and uncertainty. How does a project manager go about doing that nowadays with so much risk and uncertainty?
So without getting too technical, we can look at, we can go into a lot of detail. In fact, there are plenty of accredited risk managers. You can take a risk management qualification and become a risk manager as well.
Nice.
Something I like to say, because I don't forget, people always, I don't want to forget it. People always think of risk as a negative thing, and in our project management modules, we like to think of risk as also an opportunity. You can have a positive risk.
Of course.
Just to give you an example, working with new suppliers or with new contractors, you could look at that as a positive risk, an opportunity to develop relationships, to develop profit. So I just wanted to mention positive risk as an interesting concept. But if you look at the process of, we've got on the slide here, the different processes of risk management, you start by identifying the risk. I guess you look at tools such as, say, SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You can look at a risk matrix. You can put
Nice.
probability against impact. You can see what is the probability of a certain risk happening and what is its impact on the project. If a probability of something's happening is high but its impact is low, your response to that risk is going to be different to if the probability is high but the impact is high as well. And then the key is, how do you respond to the risk you've identified? And you identify risk at the beginning of the project, but you ought to revisit it throughout the project lifecycle. You look at and go back to this live risk document. And I guess we'll look at, just to briefly mention, the standard approaches that we have to sort of managing risk. The first thing you can do is you can avoid the risk. If you were planning a summer wedding and you want to do it outside, but you're scared it's going to rain, you just avoid the risk completely and you move your party inside. Exactly. You can transfer your risk. You can buy insurance. That's transferring the risk over to a third party. You can reduce the risk. Let's think of it in terms of reducing the risk. You can give staff more training. You can spend more time explaining how to manage a process to hope that a certain risk isn't going to happen. You can come up with a contingency. If we go back to the the wedding in the garden, instead of moving it inside, you could hire a marquee.
Yes,
So you're not avoiding the risk, but you've got a contingency planning. In case it rains, we can use the tent. And your final option is mitigation, absolutely. And your final option is to purely accept the risk. To say, I have identified this risk and I can accept it with open eyes, but at least you know what you're getting yourself into. So back to our example, you say, okay, but depending where I am, if I'm in London, the risk might be high, or if I'm in the Middle East, the risk might be a little lower, and then you decide whether to go without your tent or your indoor party for your summer wedding. So those are your basic options in terms of responding to your risk.
Lovely. And thank you very much to our producer, Michael. He's put a couple of teasers in there for you guys. We have a link to YouTube where we discussed ethics and artificial intelligence, and we have data-driven decision making on there as well. And another link to some of the work that Microsoft are doing with Dynamics that Udi was talking about earlier, and some of the work they're doing in automating certain bits of project management software and so on. So it's some nice stuff there to check out. Just before we show a quick video and move to our Q&A, I'd like you just to discuss some of the work that you've been doing in the field and some of the project work that you've been doing very briefly. Can you just describe this multi-stakeholder urban regeneration project, or as we like to call it, is it kind of like gentrification of urban areas? I'm from London, and we've done a lot of this work in kind of Stoke Newington and Hackney. Is it that kind of stuff as well?
So actually, we're not talking about gentrification. We're talking about areas of very low housing market demand.
Okay.
We're talking about areas where the market's actually failed, and the government's come in and said, let's do something about it to try and encourage the market to pick up again. So we're looking at low-income, run-down neighbourhoods. And I was involved in a project run on different levels. It runs on the national level, on the regional level, on the city level, up down to the neighbourhood. And I was involved actually right on the ground in the neighbourhood. And we're talking about, I was involved in Liverpool in a neighbourhood called Anfield, right by the football club. If you're a football fan, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. My office was on Anfield Road. Yeah.
Wow.
In Liverpool. And we were looking at a 15-year project that looked to demolish 2,000 homes in the area, which is a massive amount, and build about 1,200 homes in their place. So I focused on stakeholder management. When we look at the different stakeholders, we have government, we have local government, we have councillors, we have the football club, and we have, I think for me, it was most important of all, we have the local residents. And each one of these stakeholders have different objectives, different demands from the project. And managing everyone throughout the project became a very sensitive issue. In the neighborhood, in the neighboring project, there were some local residents who were very against this regeneration project and actually managed to delay it by a number of years through protests, through working with the media. On the whole, in our project, we worked proactively with local residents. We had a regeneration office on the ground. We were talking, we planned with local residents, and we managed to get local residents on board on the whole with this project, which was, I think, a massive achievement. In the end, the plan that was developed was a resident-led plan. But the complexity involved in terms of how do you manage what a local resident wants. They want their house that's going to be demolished. They want to be able to afford somewhere new. That's essentially what they want. They don't want to be displaced. They want to come back into the neighborhood. And you have the developer who wants to build a house and sell it for the highest price possible. And how do you manage the two? And then you have the housing associations, and you have the council, and you have the government who's funding the project. It's just a very complex project, which took a lot of stakeholder management, often and actually constant revisitation of your communication strategy, your stakeholder management strategy. And for me, the most important thing was actually day-to-day contact with all the stakeholders.
Nice.
That actually the project was stopped in 2012 due to lack of government funding. But as the project went on, I thought it was actually a very successful project, mainly because there were good relationships developed between all the stakeholders working together on the project. That's a very, very brief summary.
Very nice. Now, I'm sitting in my consultancy phase of the program, and we have a choice as consultants whether to approach our projects from a third-party perspective or take what is called the whole systems approach, which is very much about speaking to everyone who could possibly be involved in the project or the consultancy project you're doing and building the solution from the ground up through those meetings. It can take a bit longer, and in my opinion can maybe lead to a slight dilution of the idea, the initial idea, the loss of fidelity and transition of that idea, but also is a better way to get the buy-in. Would you say in project management that most things that you do take this kind of whole system approach where you kind of get everyone on board and you speak to them all first, even if you have a kind of outcome that you know is going to work based on your research, based on your data, way before you step into any room with anyone?
I think so, and I think it's not done enough. I think in project management, you can say we have a project, we have our resources, and we have our stakeholders who have power, who are paying for, who are the clients essentially, who are paying for the product.
Clients, yeah.
Exactly. So you might have stakeholders who aren't your clients, but are wider stakeholders in terms of they might be influenced by the project. And if you want to succeed in your project, I think you ought to take them into consideration right from the beginning. If you're on an infrastructure project, you're building roads for a government, say, and you're going to cut through a village or through a forest. The people living in the villages aren't directly involved in the project. They're not funding it. The government has the power to say we're actually going to build the road here because we have to. But the project is likely to run much more smoothly if you're in constant contact with these external stakeholders who aren't directly involved in the project, but have the potential to influence the project. So I say this, I do argue this broader approach is actually key because people you might not think are critical at the beginning, if you don't take them into consideration at the start, you might find they can impact, especially on your time and your costs throughout the project. So I'm a big advocate of taking a wider whole system approach in project management.
Well, thank you, and that's the point where we've finished, Udi, with the kind of questions that we asked you up front and we had a chat about. We're gonna show a quick video for those prospective students that are kind of in the application process, about to start or trying to complete their process. We have a lovely little video for a couple of minutes that kind of runs through what you need to do. For us students that have already gone through that process, I'd like you to take that 2 minutes to kind of think of a question that's important. We're getting to our dissertation phase, many of us. How do some of the topics and the issues that we've addressed today, how do we kind of look at that for our dissertation topics and questions? Whether it's leadership, stakeholder management, artificial intelligence, we've certainly got a lot of interesting things that we can look to develop with our own expertise, sectors, industries, and colleagues. So I'd like you students to start thinking about that, and for you prospective students, we have a lovely video. So I'm just going to show that as well. So just bear with me now. Thank you very much. We're back now. For those of you that have filled out your application already, I bet you wish that you had some of those tips and tricks a few years ago, but luckily you got through your admissions phase. For those of you that are going through that at the moment, I hope you listen carefully about how to put your best foot forward and make a successful application as well. You don't have to come straight out of university. You could have had experience. If you're looking at project management, for example, you could be working as a project manager for a number of years. That's absolutely fine. You need to speak to an enrollment consultant about what's the best option for you and how you present yourself in our online application. So we've looked at a case study, and now I'd like to move on, Udi, if you're okay with that, to some of the questions that we've had from our guests.
Absolutely.
So let's have a look. Now, we believe here the policy of the University of Liverpool is the unedited voice of our students. So we have many of those voices out there today, and the unedited voice of our prospective students as well today. So let's look at it. We've got a lot to unpick. We probably won't get through all of it, but keep your questions coming, and we'll pick them out. And thank you to Michael for sending them to me. Have you noted any major changes in project management techniques in the 21st century because of technology? What are those factors? So any changes in techniques that technology's brought around?
I think to start with, to try and slightly change your question, I think that the fact that project management is becoming of age, we're just seeing project management develop, let alone the technology. But obviously you want to focus on the technology. And actually, my experience has been seeing, especially in the developing world, throughout Africa, the Far East, and Middle East, just standard project management methodology being implemented. And I know that might not be the answer you want to hear, but that's the biggest change that I think is occurring. In terms of technology, we are seeing software in terms of monitoring and controlling projects. We're seeing sort of earned value management. When you're inputting data into, as one example, inputting data into your project management software in order to help you see whether you're on schedule, in terms of time, cost, and scope. So we are seeing more use of software in terms of project management, but I wouldn't say it's a major change. It's not changed the way we manage projects. It's just controlling and monitoring tools that are focused on software are starting to be more and more introduced into project management organizations. And I think this also comes because project management as a methodology is maturing. Organizations are becoming a bit more mature in terms of project management. I'd say project management as a methodology really started taking off in the 90s.
Nice.
And I'd say it's pretty young. Organizations that were I guess ahead of the game are now only have sort of 20 years, 15, 20 years experience of project management, and they're the ones at the forefront in terms of moving towards software. But it's still pretty young as a discipline, and I think there's still room for much more development in terms of, before we get to the stage of robots, just to the stage where we get smart software that can help us manage, monitor, and control our projects.
Well, lovely. I mean, our producer has just recently joined our team, has found a piece of software. It's called The Pulse. Other pieces of software available, and now all of our webinars are done in a grid with all the deliverables there, and we look at them and our responsibilities, and we get notified. And before we were just doing Excel sheets, so this is how we're not project managers, but we're using software to manage our projects. So there is a big change as well that we're seeing. People are starting to use these working groups and chat functions and communal spaces and boards a lot more. I think people are generally picking up. Udi, would you agree that the general office worker has to pick up some project management skills to survive the day-to-day anyway?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. The soft skills we carry on to, we press again and again. But yeah, in terms of planning, I think most office workers do it probably without realizing certain key issues in terms of setting yourself a goal, just managing time. That's good. It's simplistic, but it's good project management. I guess we go way beyond, say, a Gantt chart in terms of the way we manage projects. But it's a start, and it's important to say, what am I going to deliver it, when am I going to deliver it, and how am I going to deliver it? And we probably do it without realizing. In project management, we talk about sort of the iron triangle. We talk about schedule, cost, and scope.
Schedule, cost, and scope. Nice.
Yeah, and I guess people do that in their everyday life without even realizing. They've got a job to do. They think, how much is it going to cost? What's the timeline? And what exactly needs to be delivered?
Anyone who's had to plan a wedding.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the first things we ask students to do is to map out a small project. And weddings, painting a room decorating a room is a really popular one. Organizing a wedding, organizing a holiday. These are all projects that can be managed using project management methodology. And I try not to become too technical when I plan my holiday, but yeah, it is useful to have your project management tools, whether it's a work breakdown structure or a Gantt chart or a scheduler, and to use some sort of methodology to make sure these events run as smoothly as possible.
Very nice. So we have a few more questions as well. My company seems to think that more is better, and our implementation manuals are hundreds of pages long and are very complicated. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. How can I persuade the powers that be to simplify these documents and delivery processes? Nice.
Very, very tricky question. Nice. I'd say the way you can try and do it is by presenting them a simpler option. One of the good things about software that we discuss is some of these softwares have a traffic light system, say. where they have there's the green, amber, red lights, and you can monitor your project and different baselines, and you can see, are you on the green, or the amber, and the red? And that's a very simple way of presenting to senior management sort of an update on the project. I'd say if you're looking at simplifying things, a work breakdown structure is a very interesting tool that you use to map out every deliverable, every scope in the project, and it's a nice diagram. To look at diagrams, I'd say, is a good way to help simplify projects. Maybe I don't know what the specific projects are. Maybe the company does need really long manuals, but my inclination is that you're absolutely right, and it is possible to create much more succinct and user-friendly tools and manuals. And I'd say yes, try to develop simple pictorial, diagrammatic tools to complement, I guess, and eventually to substitute for your 200-page manuals.
So, yeah,
I mean, we're moving. Sorry, we're moving into social media. You can video presentations.
I was about to say they're moving into my world. We could do a video content series, tutorials. Click the link below the video if you want to learn about the full process. But here's a couple of highlights about this process, and then read more by looking at the actual manuals and stuff. So you can kind of run complementary material there. So that's a really cool question. Next one. Do you believe leadership is one of the most important points in project management? And how would you rate leadership skills for the success of a project? Then it says in brackets, rate from 1 to 10. I'm not sure if we could be able to rate it on a sliding scale, but how do you believe leadership is important in managing projects, and how important do you think your ability to understand your leadership style, change your leadership style, is to the success of the outcome of that project?
Right. I mean, let's start by saying you can have people who turn bad leaders, who their employees and their workers would rate them as bad leaders, and they can deliver successful projects within the time frame and the scope and cost within all your. It is absolutely possible. I guess you're not going to have a happy workforce, but your company might be happy. They might deliver the product. But yes, I think what makes a good leader is a very difficult question. Whenever I think about leadership, I automatically think about the term charisma. What is charisma? How can you learn charisma? Can you pick up charisma? Is it sort of is leadership a natural talent that just comes? Can you learn leadership? These are very difficult questions. And I think to some extent you can become a better leader, and on the other side you have certain people that are just naturally better leaders. And while I'd say I'm not going to rate from 1 to 10, and I'd say leadership is very important for the long-term strategic thinking of the organization. That's what I'd emphasize. So whilst you might have someone who's not a great leader, you might, over the short term, deliver some good projects. If you want a good organization with happy employees who are in for the long term, who you want to invest with, leadership is critical. So yeah, it's a complicated answer. It's not going to impact on the short term on your success of a specific project. But yeah, I'd say over the long term, I'd say having good leaders is critical to the success of your organization.
And we look at that on our project management course, but also on our MBA in management course itself. The first module is called Being a Leader on the MBA, and that looks exactly at what you're discussing now. It looks at the leadership styles, and it looks at charisma. Is good leadership nature or nurture? Later on, when we look at innovation, we look at creativity and ask the same question: is creativity nature or nurture? And there's certainly techniques, Udi, I hope you agree, and ways that by learning and studying on one of these programs, you can kind of look at ways to put structure into that. So identifying maybe a style in yourself, identifying the culture of your organization, and then kind of looking at practical ways to bridge those gaps, even if you might not be what they say naturally charismatic. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. We look at changing leadership or culture within an organization is a very difficult thing, and we look at ways of doing it from the top down or from the bottom up, different ways of changing culture. But yeah, there are tools and techniques. You can be aware. I think the first step and the most important step is becoming aware of what the leadership traits are within your organization and also within yourself. What are your strong points? and what can you work on. And a program such as ours gives you the tools and the theory in order to become aware of what are your specific leadership styles, what are your traits, and how can you develop complementary leadership traits. If you weren't aware of the concept, you didn't know whether you're a transformational leader or autocratic leader. If your organization is an autocracy, if it's a clan type organization, if it's a market orientation, these are all different theories that you have to be aware of in order to understand your context.
Nice. So we have about 5 to 10 minutes left in the webinar. We started a couple of minutes late. So just want to get a couple more of these questions in because, Udi, we've got so many great questions. I want to get through a few of them. Not any of them are very easy to answer, Udi, but we'll give it a try. What's the biggest challenge facing project managers over the next 10 years? There's a big one. We'll drop a few bombs at the end. Big questions. What's the biggest challenge facing project managers?
Who knows? Who knows? A very difficult question to answer.
What are some of the challenges you think are going to be prominent for project managers in the next few years?
I think the hot and sexy topic that we're talking about is going to come into play more, and managing software, managing artificial intelligence is going to become a big issue, because software and well, not robots, but let's focus on software. Software is going to become more prominent within project management, and it's key that organizations invest sufficiently in terms of time and money to train their project managers and their staff in terms of managing these projects. I think it's really important to get people into project management, whether it's at the NPM or professional qualifications. The world as a globe is actually developing. I think we're only going to see more and more projects and project management organizations in the next 10 to 15 years. And I think keeping up with demand is going to be an issue. Having the right number of trained, qualified, and successful project managers who have a good amount of experience is going to be a challenge in terms of project management in the future. I don't have, it's hard. I don't have some sort of crystal ball, but we're moving into I guess a next stage in terms of development.
So I have another question here. Another, one of these big kind of ideological, difficult questions to answer. When it seems like your project is going in the wrong direction or starting to fail, apart from maybe crying to yourself, what do you do?
This is a very common question because I don't have the exact statistics, but a large number of projects don't see it through to the end. A large number of projects, when an organization realizes, or you as a project manager realize that actually going through to the end of this project is going to cost too much, is not in the best interest of the organization, project can close, and that's an option. It's not an option to be scared about. It's an option to take very seriously. Sometimes it is better to say we're not going to be able to complete this project. There are other options as well. Other options in terms of being flexible and adaptable. You can change things. You can crash the project. It might cost more, but you can make. If it depends on what your problem is. If your problem is schedule, you have to complete your project within a tighter time frame. It might cost you more, but you might be able to crash your project to deliver it earlier. I think the best thing to do is try not to sit down and cry, because quite often there is a solution, but you have to take that step back. I'd say speak to your project sponsors, speak to your senior management, consult, ask, involve other people. Do what you can to solve the issues. But yeah, I guess what leads to despair is not knowing exactly what your problems are. And if you can think and take a step back and say, my problem is to do with a supplier that's not delivering on time, or it's to do with scope, my client didn't define what they wanted properly, or a product is simply too expensive, then you can try and work towards a solution. And if you really can't work towards a solution, then you can terminate the project.
Yes, there is the option to pull out the project. There is the option if you know that you're heading inexorably in the wrong direction and you can't get the buy-in and it's not working out, that there is an option to scrap the project, and that is a viable option in some cases. I'd like to thank our audience for today, and I'd like to ask you, Udi, one last question before we leave. An interesting one as well that was saved to the end. How can a project manager provide a solid framework for organic collaboration between the team without scope creep? I love that word. Or simply getting out of line. So how can a project manager provide a solid framework for organic collaboration between your team without scope creep or simply getting out of line?
I think technology actually has an important role to play here. You know, we're moving to a time where there's many more virtual projects. We're moving to projects where team members are all over the world. And what my students at least report is that when they have social media, when they have WhatsApp groups, when they have social interaction, when they have constant, continuous contact between team members, that's a key success factor in terms of delivering a project on time. And I'd say communication is key to provide a framework such as an online social, or not necessarily social, it could be a professional space where documents are shared, where ideas are shared, where there is constant and daily communication between team members. That's an important way to enable teams to communicate properly. And I don't think it necessarily has to lead to scope creep. It's just good practice in terms of good teamwork and good team communication. And that's what I'd emphasize. I emphasize there's room in terms of project management for social media and for I guess social interaction on a daily basis between team members where it's appropriate.
Very nice. So there's a handout for everyone where you can look at some of Udi's answers in better depth. For those of you that are still making a decision about the program or the application process, please make sure that chat to your enrollment advisor to really learn how to put your best foot forward and to make quite a high involved decision. Make sure it's the right decision for you. We know that our programs are going to help you progress within the world of management, project management, and business. And it's important that you learn how you can get the most out of them. And that's what we're here for. We've got a wonderful webinar next week where we're going to look at supply chain. That's another industry, Udi, that's changing. Robots are picking up my packages in the warehouse and then delivering them onto trucks. Are there drivers on those trucks? Who knows? And they're delivering them to the drones, and the drones are flying over my garden and dropping packages in my hands. It's not quite like that at the moment. I'm still waiting for my package from China for about 3 weeks. But we're going to discuss this with one of your colleagues, Dr. Dotan Adebanyo, who's an expert in supply chain and looked at the food industry. So we're going to have a chat about him and discuss, carry on this discussion with him that you've inspired today, Udi, looking at some of those roles of the project manager within that role and the supply chain manager and some of those transferable skills. So thank you very much, Udi, for your expertise today. Thank you very much to our audience. Please take your handout and please complete our survey, because otherwise we don't know how to make things better for the next lot of guests that we have. So please fill that in. Thank you very much, Udi.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you all for your very challenging questions.
Yes, and thank you very much for your excellent answers, and thanks to our audience. My name is Joe O'Brien. It's the University of Liverpool Online presentation. I wish you all good luck, but if you're listening and you're prepared, well, you won't need any luck, will you? So thank you very much. Have a good, productive evening.